one of the key aspects of this entire thing is that, this all has to do with people's religious belief and their ideas of the afterlife. We can talk about the court case all we want, and the word afterlife and death is not part of it, but everyone is sort of implicated in that people are so fervent about the organization and its doctrine and whatnot, because they are taught to believe, they truly believe that we legit have all the freaking answers that hundreds and billions of people have never ever had. We have them. We should approach every conversation and every criticism and everything with that sort of zeal behind us, and in the back of our mind. And when it comes to this objective thing of here's a court case, here's an investigation, there are certain things that are found here and here, and these people saw this and this, and you weren't there, and millions of other members weren't there, and you have to sort of weigh all these things. Everyone's sort of salvation and idea of the afterlife is implicated in that.
Mhm.
um and I uh yeah, so something else that often comes up when criticism, when I try to sort of give a sort of critical view, is that one question that people sort of can be seen as a sort of knee-jerk reaction is this question of well, if you don't want me to go here, then where the hell am I supposed to go? Or he's like as if you're sort of supposed to have the answers. It doesn't just stop at criticism for the people. It's like you're supposed to have the criticism and the answer to where I need to go and whatnot. And yeah, I'm not too sure. Do you have any sort of response? I'm sure you've come across that. Do you have any sort of, you talked about that just now, but I don't know, could you say something more about?
Yeah, because I actually
Yeah.
received a comment on one of my TikToks. They're just like, well, just leave those people be. They're not doing any harm. Like if if they're not at LDM, then where else are they supposed to go? And it kind of in a way of telling me to just stop talking about it because those people are not doing any bad by being there. And it's just I feel like people's focus is just all over the place. Like some people are so focused on the case that they're blinded to the whole reason why they're going to church in the first place. And then some people are blinded to the case and they're only going there because they think it's, a church and it's for God. So it's just it goes either way. And I feel like to answer for both people is just at the end of the day, you have to really outweigh the, the benefits and the not so good benefits of that church, which is, I feel like the negatives outweigh the positives in that church. And just knowing that life, there's so much more to life than just being confined to that organization that is extremely small in this world. Very, very small. I've realized once I was out,
Yeah.
odds are it's just when you start to analyze the church for what it truly is, you start to realize that it is more bad than good. And I just feel like when you're out of that church, yes, you may not have an exact place to go, because I also question that, where am I supposed to worship God now? What do I do? And it's when you start reading the Bible in a different light and a different perspective, I at least realized that, to answer that specific question was that your body's a temple, correct? That's what it says in the Bible. So you don't need to attend a physical temple in order to worship God. You do that just by standing, you are the temple. So I feel
Mhm.
if you want to continue in that religious route and that same mindset of following the Bible, then you could use that text in the Bible by saying, hey, your body's a temple, you can worship at home, you don't need to go to a physical building. God is everywhere. So I just feel like having that peace of mind, at least it helped me in the moment when I was trying to navigate where to go next. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's the problem, is that trying to jump to different churches, trying to find out the right one. I feel like you'll never find the right one because they're all we're humans. We're not perfect. So
Mhm.
every single place is going to have their set of issues. And I just feel like I know out there may be healthy churches. I don't know. I've never came across them. I have yet to visit another temple just due to the religious trauma of LDM. So,
Mhm.
but I have heard from my classmates because I attend a private Christian university. And so my classmates, they try to encourage me. They're like, go to a church. There are some that are very toxic, but there are some that are very beautiful and have great relationships. You can find one out there. It's just going to take a little bit more effort. And
Mhm.
so So I know there's probably some out there and you just have to look for them, but just, I guess, finding and being able to go to a church with such an open mind. And I know churches are not for everyone, so it really just depends on the person. Uh,
Mhm.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's I bring the question up because not that it even needs to be answered, because I think the way that the question has been raised to me is in the consist it's in the way of sort of shutting me up and telling me that you don't have the answers, and so therefore I'm going to go with what I'm familiar with, and continues to tell me I have the answers, every time I go to the services. For me, I always for sure wanted to leave the organization for years prior to the arrest. I always kept going to church just to go and just sort of have my face seen, and think that one day it'll all click, and I'll give in, and I won't ever have these conflicting thoughts within me ever again. Um, that was my sort of relationship with the church. But no, even prior to the arrest and prior to me actually like stopping attending, um i I found myself going much farther with like my criticism of religion and religious faith in general. And so I know, I think for the most part, most of the people that I know that I have left LLDM continue to go to another church, or at least continue to believe in God and Jesus and all that other stuff. um Not everyone sort of outright flat stops going to churches and has these bigger ideas of like what they think of religious faith in general, like I have. Excuse me. Um, uh, and so, yeah, when I receive these questions, I understand what that means. I definitely did not expect to have some sort of answer when I stopped going to church. I always told myself that, like, if something happens in the future, then it sort of, if I end up joining some other organization, that happens in the future. But for now, and I'm very sure, like for the rest of my life, I'm not going to pertain to another group of this manner, because I feel like my criticism of LLD, my criticism of things beyond LLDM came first before it came to LLDM, and the specifics around that community that I grew up in, that sort of set of ideas that I grew up in. Um, and yeah, I tell people I'm very glad to sit down with them and tell them that I'm glad to explain just why I don't believe in the veracity of the Bible or other holy books, or miracles and all these other things. Um, but I tell them, mission critical number one for my channel and everything that I do is just to get people to stop going to this one particular organization that is very, 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 very wrong, and that we know a lot about it, and we know it's very, very wrong, and at least you can start from there and then take it from, go to whatever you want to go to. But something that I think is something I don't want to avoid in conversations regarding La Luz del Mundo is the topic of what a cult is, because I feel like that is something that came into my vocabulary and my understanding later, or really kind of like when the arrest happened, is like my idea of what I was in changed like radically. It
Mhm.
wasn't just that I didn't want to be in it, but that it was a particular sort of thing. And so I think something that's very important in discussing uh, why people should leave La Luz del Mundo, and how La Luz del Mundo survives, and the sort of situation that it's in, and its strategies of maintaining a grip on people's lives, is that well, there are these particular high religious, highly high demand groups that can be within a religious strain, and these things can be called cults. And that, when people leave La Luz del Mundo, I certainly don't want them falling into another cult. you know I won't exactly go against go against like religion in general with these people, when talking to them about LLDM and why they should get out. But I almost always for sure try to bring up why, um, this church is a particular kind of thing that can survive that survives in a particular way, and that, I don't want people falling into like something that could be potentially worse, or maybe sort of less innocuous. But still, there is these other groups that Luz del Mundo is like sort of aware of, but it doesn't talk about them as cults. Um, and so, I think I have this video that's probably still on my channel where I discuss, does the Luz del Mundo even know what a cult is? And one thing I discussed there was that, like, La Luz del Mundo can criticize Catholicism all day long, but Catholicism is not necessarily like a cult. It's too big and mainstream of a religion to have to resort to the strategies that a group like LLDM has. But LLDM can be aware of a group like Scientology. LLDM, we can hear a sermon if we want about Scientology, about Jehovah's Witnesses, about Nexium, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
But but they themselves won't use the word cult. You know, they'll sort of just point out these other religious groups as being wrong in their own way, but I don't think they necessarily point out what a cult is. And I think it's discussing cults and discussing why Scientology is such a terrible organization. So sometimes I think it might be interesting, and I haven't seen this exactly work, but you know, talking about cults in general, and then seeing if that is a sort of backdoor into the mind of a LLDM member and getting them to think along those terms instead of just you're attacking La Luz del Mundo in outright. Did
Yeah.
you know what I mean? We're like,
Mhm.
mhm,
Yeah, and I think understanding what a religious cult is really gives perspective on what LDM was or is still, because I feel like that really helped me when I did leave and I was getting those almost like intrusive thoughts of like, oh my gosh, what if I was wrong? Like, what if LDM is a truth? And what if I am, because then you start to doubt yourself almost when you're feeling very alone due to the fact that your community has turned their backs on you. So you start to kind of almost regret leaving, right? And I remember I was shamed and saying that bad things were happening to me because I left church. And because at the time I was pregnant. So I was like, oh my gosh, like, am I causing this on my baby? And of course, like, I never wanted to, hurt my son. So I started thinking of those things. But then I was like, you know what? Like, I need to research more and kind of just give myself that clarity, that information to be able to, I guess it was more so for like my peace of mind. And so when I
yeah,
started looking into what religious cults were and how cults manipulate their members and the bite model of a cult, and I started reading all those things and educating myself on it, I felt so much better knowing that, like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like, it really was a cult. It's okay that
hmm
I have left. I'm like, these are just the after effects of leaving, and what I'm going through is normal for someone who has left a high control religious cult.
hmm
So I think definitely like educating yourself and constantly learning about what religious cults are, what LDM does, and looking at it from an unbiased perspective will really help process everything, and it'll just lead you to a better place.
hmm